In the face of financial setbacks like job loss or unexpected medical expenses, a clear plan helps maintain stability. Begin by categorizing monthly expenses into essentials, such as rent and groceries, and non-essentials. Prioritize areas to cut back. Create a realistic budget that prioritizes your essentials and adjust it regularly to stay on track. When debt payments become challenging, communicate early with creditors. Many offer relief options like deferred payments or temporary reductions in interest. To increase income, consider freelance or gig work. Skills or hobbies can also become income sources through platforms or local opportunities. Utilize available community resources, including financial assistance programs and benefits like unemployment or food assistance. Financial counseling from organizations such as the National Foundation for Credit Counseling can offer valuable guidance for navigating debt and budgeting. Taking proactive steps in each of these areas can support resilience and facilitate recovery during difficult times.
Yanely, you work for a really cool nonprofit. What community resources or programs do you suggest young people try to find, especially if they're facing financial challenges right now?
Yeah, I mean, I'll definitely start with the nonprofit where I work, right? I'm a little biased, but ngpf.org is a free resource. It will always be free, and it's got curriculum for young people. So as young as middle school, but primarily high school, and even college students access our materials. We got lessons, we got games, activities, homework assignments, assessments that cover every topic under the financial education umbrella: banking, budgeting, investing, taxes, insurance, paying for college, alternatives to four-year college, types of credit, managing credit. So, if any of these topics is overwhelming you right now, start by giving yourself the gift that keeps on giving, which is the gift of financial knowledge and financial literacy, right? Then you can pass that on. And if you ever felt like, I wish I had a class that taught me about personal finance and money and taxes and all these things, well, this is the class. And if you didn't get it in school, you can absolutely give it to yourself with our lessons at ngpf.org. But I think for me, it's more so than just sitting at home going through the lessons. I've been through that. I went to college and I felt very lonely in my room studying and writing papers late into the night. And it didn't excite me, right? Because I'm a very extroverted person. So if you're an extroverted person and you grow and thrive in communities or in friend groups, then sitting at home doing assignments or reading about money and doing it in a silo, it's not going to bring you joy. And I think the problem with the financial literacy space and personal finance changing your financial behaviors is that it can feel so lonely. So the more you can plug yourself into, whether it's a Slack group, whether it's a Facebook group, whether it's a challenge like hashtag No Spend November. Social media is great for this because it turns something that is often this lonely thing that's full of shame and turns it into a social thing that's full of joy. So for me, social media played a huge role in my enjoyment of changing my money mindset and starting to get my life together financially, stop being a hot mess, and, pay off my credit card and connect with people who were also on a debt freedom journey. So, if you're feeling alone and that's a big issue for you right now, and then on top of that, overwhelmed with how much knowledge there is to learn, then definitely plug yourself into groups, Slack groups, Facebook groups, social media, great place to start.
Yeah, I think Vicki's onto something with the Money Stories Club. Rose Jean chimed in. She loves the idea. She's on LinkedIn. Joe, I want to ask you about a money story of yours. You were once $81,000 in debt. Saying that raises my blood pressure. Tell us your resilient path to recovery.
I think my blood pressure was slightly high during that whole event. But I think it's hard to follow the mic drop moment. Wait a minute. Yanely is an extrovert. I find that hard to believe.
Really?
Yes, doesn't seem to be an extrovert at all. But seriously, my path changed like a lot of people's. Vicki talked about money story. My money story was I was on the way back from meeting with high-powered, high-income, high-net worth clients. I was a great advisor for other people. I was a financial mess. I had over $80,000 in debt. In fact, I couldn't get a new to me car because A, I couldn't afford one, and B, nobody would give me a loan. It's funny. A friend of mine even told me, he said, "Oh, Joe, I know you don't want a new car, but these car dealerships, they offer loans to everybody." I am a testament to tell you, I went in there and the dude goes, "I'll be right back," after he looked at my credit, and he comes back and just goes, "Oh man. Oh man." And I went, "Yeah." But I ran out of gas on the way home from meeting with clients. And it's funny because talk about shame. Here I am giving a bunch of advice to other people. And this is the time that I cried about my money. You know, there's a statistic from a great nonprofit group that talks about the number of people that cry about their money. And it's about half of us. And by the way, you'd think that that is more often people living paycheck to paycheck like I was then. But actually, even high net worth individuals, just a smidge less, cry about their money because, to Vicki's point, their money's going one way and their values are going a whole different way. And they know it and they don't really know how to change. But for me, I ended up, sounds like an old guy story. I walked a mile. I literally walked a mile to uphill, I'm sure in snow. It wasn't snow, but I walked a mile to a gas station. The dude did not want to give me a little plastic gas tank because he thought I was going to steal it. And I took 85 cents I found in the cushion of my car and I filled it with as much gas as I could get. Somehow I made it home after I convinced the guy to give me the gas tank. But I realized there was a lie that I was living, and there was also something that I need to realize. The lie I was living was, if I just make more money, I'll solve all my problems, right? If I just make a little more. Well, without having the value system we've been talking about what's important to me, it didn't matter how much money I made. I mean, this was the mid 90s, and I was making maybe $90,000 a year. So you extrapolate this, that's almost $200,000 in today's dollars. If I had made $200,000, I would have spent 220. If I made 250, I would have spent 280. If I made 400, I would have spent 440. It didn't make it more money was not going to solve my problem. And I think a lot of people are living that lie. But the second thing, and this gets to your resilience answer, Andy, and it's kind of a long way to it, which is I had to realize that the brain that got me into this problem was not the brain that was going to get me out of this problem. I needed to find great people with the heart of a teacher to help me. And once I did that, and I surrounded myself with phenomenal people and this reassurance that other people who, you know, aren't geniuses have figured out problems way worse than this, and you can too, I immediately felt empowered. And it's funny because I still had the over $80,000 worth of debt. But once my mindset changed and I was in control, everything felt so much better. I mean, when I was only $75,000 to $70,000 to $65,000 and $60,000 in debt, I felt like it was paid off because I knew that it was me and I can get this done.
Yeah, that's impressive. Vicki, your thoughts?
I'm sitting here thinking about it. When I wrote Your Money, Your Life, I was living in a community of people who were all dedicated to not just financial education, but education about applying consciousness to the entire flow of life, whether it was money or health or whatever. You know, we were really a consciousness team. Anyway, we were 8 people. We were sharing expenses. I lived on a ridiculously low amount of money a month. Probably about $700 a month. This was back in the 90s. Yeah. And, it crept up to 750 or 800. And then, life happened, many things happened, and we went out on our own. So suddenly I have rent. I have, suddenly my expenses tripled or more. And I didn't have a mindset. I had a mindset that frugality is my friend. Frugality is how I make it through. I didn't consider that community made a huge difference, that, social isolation, being an individual is, yeah, right. We got that, right?
Yes.
Being an individual is more expensive than basically sharing resources with other people. And so I had to heal myself with this. I called it cash register consciousness, that if I bought something, if I did a splurge, I would actually have to go find something else I wanted and not buy it to balance it out in my head. So I got into hyper frugality, and it was really not right. And I had to work my way out of that into back up to enoughness rather than down to enoughness. And So that's one money story. There were 6 years of my life I lived on $100 a month, but I grew a garden, we hunted and butchered, and I rebuilt the engine in my car. And I want to mention that this is sort of part of my message, is that money is not the only means of exchange. Skills are a means of exchange. I'm not suggesting everybody work in their car. I can't do it anymore because it's a computer on wheels. But the capacity to do for yourself, just small things with a YouTube video, or also the skill of communication, like how many couples would save some money on counseling if they could just communicate in a non-defensive way. Now that's a big skill. So just to think about that, your skills are a currency, that you're sharing resources, whether it's through Free Cycle or thrift stores or whatever. Sharing resources, Habitat for Humanity, is another skill. And these are not necessarily deprivation skills, like oh well, I want to go to wherever the big stores are now, and I get something new, but you realize, oh no, I'm smart, I got that great blouse for like $1. So yeah, I just want to drop that in to the conversation, because this idea of resilience and bouncing back, that's in terms of the financial markers of resilience. Like, I've gotten in debt, I can bounce back out of debt. But there's also, we're living in a context of disruptions. You just think about the people in Asheville or the people in Valencia right now. There's like larger conditions that are forces in our lives that we're sort of cringing, thinking, oh, I hope it doesn't happen here. And so the skills of community, the skills of communication, there's a lot of skills that we can build to be able to work with our neighbors and work with our own consciousness, to be able to ride those waves. And so I would also drop that in as a resilience skill.
What am I? Can I mention something there, Andy? Because Vicki, I really like what you're saying there. One of my favorite segments on our podcast, every year we have on a guy talking about fire prevention and about, the best insurance you can have at your home, wherever it is having a fire plan. And all of us, I'm sure, when we were kids, if you went to a school, they would always do, what if there's a tornado? I lived in Michigan. If there was a tornado, if there's a whatever, we had all of these prevention things. And yet we get to life as an adult and we don't do that anymore. And I love the idea of building the skill ahead of time. I know that one of my favorite quotes, and this is, I'm not sure I love the messenger, but I love the message. Jack Welch back in the 90s said, change before you have to, right? And Jack Welch, definitely not a lot of people's best friend, the way he ran his companies. But I love that message, that if we know ahead of time, because we've done it when we didn't need to, that I can earn more if I need to, I can spend less if I need to, I can change course if I need to, just through a course of, quote, fire drills. I think we're going to be way better off, because we can do these drills when we're calm. So when we're not calm and our blood pressure's up, we can make some fairly, cognizant decisions.
Yeah.
And you did a lot of surveys in preparing your book, and focus groups about how people feel. How are you doing with your money? What did you learn?
It was fascinating. I surveyed 1,000 people between the ages of 21 and 45 and asked them questions about sort of how much they had in investments, how much they had in the bank, what their credit card debt was like, if they had a mortgage, student loan debt. And then I asked a series of questions about how they felt about how they were doing. And then I did the classic researchers 2x2 matrix. On one axis was how well do you think you're doing? And on the other axis was how well are you doing? So how well are you doing? How well do you think you're doing? And only 12% of the people thought they were doing well and were doing well. 12%. Another sort of 15% or so were doing well, but didn't know it. I would call them the worried well. About 50%, 49% were not doing well and knew it. But then whatever that difference was, another sort of handful of people, maybe 25% or so, were not doing well, but thought they were. And that to me was a really interesting group because they were anchoring their views on how they were doing by looking at their peers and often saying, well, I'm doing about the same as my peers are, so that must be fine. The other thing I found very scary as someone who works a lot with the 401k system is a lot of people in that group also said, my employer has defaulted me into my 401k system, so I know I'm saving enough. And often employers only default people into their savings programs at 3%. And we all know 3% is not enough to be saving. You need to be saving probably around 15% to be able to retire sort of in your mid 60s and maintain your style of living. So this notion of, well, I must be doing okay because somebody told me somebody did, right, is just a lack of engagement, but also I think reflective of how difficult it is for many people to feel like they can actually dig in and answer some of these questions for themselves. But that was a very interesting group of work. And then I actually broke those categories of people. I went and did focus groups with the same sort of characteristics. And the things I learned from the focus groups were also interesting. So that statistic, what I just said about, I know I'm saving enough because I'm saving what my neighbor is, or because my employer told me to save that much. The other thing that was fascinating is that 12% of people that were doing well and knew it, all of them except one of them had a family member or family friend take them by the hand when they were in their sort of early to mid-teens and teach them about money, budgeting, and investing. So that happened much earlier than I think most of us think is sort of normal, right? We wait for kids to be older. We wait till they have their first paycheck if we start talking about money. Fun fact, most families would rather talk about sex than talk about money with their children. So there's, just that small group of people, right, were taught when they were younger than most of us think, is necessary. And that's when those habits really start getting ingrained. So I thought that was fascinating as well.
That is fascinating. Let's go right into segment 3.